Hi, I'm Jason Fisk.
And I'm Mike Tarsella of Team National. Our group finished fourth in the MarkStrat simulation of the summer session. As the graphic shows, we started the contest first overall and held the position of either first or second 3 times during the course of the simulation. But we ended the competition a disappointing 4th overall in share price and 3rd overall in unit sales after faltering in the course's final week. We really thought we'd have a far better showing, so we weren't happy with the result.
We started with Noon and Nova, which focused on our shoppers and high earners markets. In period 4, we also added NOLO to target the savers market, and later Note/Knox, the focus on explorers.
So Noon was our bread and butter product for most of the 6-week game. Due to our misfortune in period 6, it accounted for all of our profit. As we began the simulation, we found success as this product most closely aligned with shoppers' ideal values. After a fairly slow start, we initiated an R&D project for Noon in the second period, closely matching shoppers' expectations in this segment, especially on power and price. And it worked. We gained significant share in short order. Noon really was the runaway product leader overall by period 4. We sold 1.5 million Noon units overall, far more than our closest competitor. And even though we lost some share toward the end, Noon was still the highest revenue brand in the simulation and had a market-leading 13.3% of the Sonite sales. Nova began the simulation most closely aligning with the high earners' ideal values. It held the number 1 or number 2 market position in this segment up until the final period. We were able to charge a slightly higher price than our competition because it was a high-quality product. Unfortunately, we made several mistakes with this product in period 5, which we'll talk about shortly. Nova ended the period a distant number 3 in the high earners market, and it detracted from our performance in the final period. Next is NOLO, our offering in the savers market, which started as an R&D project in period 3. Our strategy here was to align with customer expectations based almost entirely on power and price. We attempted to create a very low-priced, high-powered product that we thought would take share. But after 3 periods of positioning and repositioning, we never really were competitive with this product, and we had just 55,000 sales over the final 3 periods.
Lastly, there's our Note/Knox product, which targeted the explorers market. We'd taken out a loan in period 3 to fund this R&D project. Everything looked like we could take big share here. But the period before, we had a player come into the market that took a lot of market share. Because of this, we were never a big factor, and in a fairly small market niche, we pulled the period 6 to avoid further losses.
Okay, so next, let's take a look at the top 10 things we learned from MarkStrat. Number 1, it pays to aggressively go after the most attractive market and establish your position there as soon as you can. That's what we did with Noon with great success. We had a cumulative growth rate in the mid-20% range, and we had more unit sales than anybody else. Lesson 2, it's really counter to lesson number 1. Don't spend a lot of money on markets with little to no growth. And this speaks to what we did with Knox. We underestimated the risk of not doing well enough in a lackluster explorers market, because it's really not a tide to lift your boat. Lesson 3, even price-sensitive shoppers can perceive your product as cheap. Again, our goal with NOLO was to focus almost entirely on high power at low price and not worry about design, display, or any of the other factors. And that just didn't work. Lesson 4, it's a saying used by traders: cut your losses and let your winners ride. We repeatedly made the mistake of thinking we could fix NOLO and Knox, our savers and explorers offerings, and we would have been better to pump a lot more of that budget into Noon. Lesson 5 is to get a lead and keep a lead. In hindsight, I think we should have taken a bigger loan and started our R&D projects at least a period sooner. I think the market will reward big risks, but mainly when you have first mover advantage. And so we should have done that. Lesson 6, consumers' product expectations are going to change over time. So you need to prepare for that by predicting where the mood of the market is headed. We learned this, especially in the high earners market, with the need for power slowly declined period by period. And this made our decision to go for an R&D project targeting power a mistake. Lesson 7, more is not always better. Just because consumers are choosing products based on particular factors, say power and price, you're not going to win by turning all of those to 11, because some consumers are turned off by features and more power and more things they think they don't need. Lesson 8, do not skimp on ad research. We did that in periods 4 through 6, and that hurt us. Lesson 9, make sure you strike gold at least twice. We needed at least 2 outright segment leaders to win this competition. We only had 1. And finally, lesson 10 is to continue to seek advice. We did that early on, but we got confident after taking a lead in period 4, and we stopped asking the professor and anyone else for advice on what we should do. And I think that haunted us.
Now let's take a look at what we learned in the simulation regarding the key areas of marketing management. Concerning targeting, Chapter 7 taught us that we can't be all things to all people. Mark Stratt took this a step further. We learned that market segments may share some characteristics, but they are distinct for a reason. With Nova, we made the big mistake of going after 2 segments late in the simulation. We were correct in analyzing these 2 distinct groups were coming closer together in terms of ideal values, but what about psychographics, their attitudes, personalities, lifestyles? These 2 groups were segmented for a good reason, and we shouldn't have targeted them together. We lost an amazing amount of share trying to target both segments at once. Our high earners market share went from the mid-20 range to less than 3 in a single period, and we didn't gain nearly enough in the professionals market to make it worth our while. Regarding segmentation, the Chapter 7 lecture taught us that when defining a segment, ask these questions. Does it have definable characteristics? Can customers there be profitably persuaded to buy our product? Is the market opportunity large enough? We should have looked back at this lesson before entering the explorers market. The segment wasn't big enough to justify the cost of entry. We did poorly there. I think we would have, even if we had made better advertising and commercial team decisions. As far as product goes, we learned in Chapter 9 the importance of keeping your products distinct and your message sharp. We did that well with Noon, and to a lesser degree with Nova, but we failed to do this with the 2 other offerings. Regarding Nova, there were some product stories that we could have told better. If we had a chance to do this simulation over again, we would focus a lot more on points of differentiation, especially as this market matured. A lot of our competition focused on building up power and price of their products with R&D projects. But we think power and price became points of parity, especially with the introduction of LOVA in the high earners market. The real point of differentiation for our product was its superior design. It also had a pretty good display. Looking back, I think we could have touted our points of differentiation a little bit more. Our biggest product challenge, other than managing R&D projects, was trying to gauge customer demand and set production targets. We started with a baseline, but it was difficult to figure out how much share we could take or lose. We did a better job of this with Noon, but that was largely because of law of large numbers working in our favor. Our production could be off by tens of thousands of units, and it would still be within the 20% of the period's unit sales.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about price in Mark Stratt. We learned back in week 3 that in order to sell, you need to convince customers that your product's benefits are greater than the costs. And we did this early in the contest, and I think we lost sight of it later on. I would say we did have a clear pricing objective, though, for each product. We went after share with Noon, current profit with Nova, and we used a low price point with Nolo, and then a market price point for Knox. We also differentiated our pricing policies pretty well. For example, with Nova, we kept a slightly higher price, and we were careful not to start a price war because our per unit costs were pretty high there relative to everybody else. Again, where we messed up was in focusing on price to the detriment of benefits. When we redid Nova, High earners saw that product as cheap. This after we spent a lot of effort over multiple periods to be seen as the Cadillac offering. And as a result, we wrecked our brand image. And then with savers, the bargain hunters out there, we tried to undercut everyone on price really far too much. Instead, we should have priced the product really in line with what customers expected to pay, and we would have sold a lot more.
Now let's talk about place. Let's start with the distribution channels. Overall, our goal was to keep our commercial spending roughly in line with our competition. For the most part, we did that. We were very competitive with the top teams, even though we ended the competition with 3 products compared to our competition's 4 or 5. But in terms of overall spend, we didn't do a good enough job keeping up. With Team L back in the game, and this is partly because they ramped up their spending on commercial salespeople, especially in the mass merchandiser market. We finished 3rd overall in mass merchandiser channel spending. We should have been number 1. Let's also look at our coverage. We could have focused a lot more on our distribution KPIs found on our company scorecard. The chart shown pretty much explains the missed opportunity in distribution. We lost no sales in periods 1 through 3 because we had plenty of coverage. Our coverage continued to build through period 4, and then we began to lose sales because we didn't keep this as a competitive advantage. Lastly, let's focus on inventory. The one good thing we did was not lose many sales due to not making enough product. The only time this happened was period 3. In all other periods, we were just fine. We did, however, let our inventory holding costs build in the later half of the competition. In retrospect, we could have been more successful if we focused more on these KPIs.
All right, lastly, let's talk about promotion, and really that means advertising. We did fairly well with advertising until we were outspent late in the game, especially by Team L. But here's what we did well. We'll start there. Early on, we built awareness for all of our products, and we supported each one of them with a healthy budget. With Nova, I think we were smart. We focused our ad messages on perceived power because we had a problem there, and we did this very early on, to the point where we had completely overcome this by the middle of the simulation. But our biggest mistake was not spending more to protect our Noon franchise. If we did nothing else, we could have locked up this competition by more heavily promoting our #1 brand. So we knew this, and yet we compromised Noon by promoting upstart brands too aggressively. We were concerned at the time that 80% of the target market already knew about our Noon product, so we should try to build awareness elsewhere. But as we learned, especially as we went along, advertising is more, it's a lot more than building brand awareness. So I would say we could have and should have spent more on our ad research in general. So this could have helped us counter campaigns from competitors such as Solo in the shoppers market. They came on pretty late. The only market where we truly wasted our advertising dollars was Nolo, our Savers offering. We made a big mistake there in period 4. We thought we would announce our offering to the world, spend $3 million or so to advertise this the first year, price our product lower than everybody else, right? And we were going to nail it. But we didn't explain why we were any different than anyone else. Just going after awareness against entrenched competitors was a mistake. But that did nothing to take share away from Locke, the ultimate champion in the Savers market. And the KPI shows we had it right for a while, but again, faltered at the end. So to sum up our experience with MarkStrat, we made big mistakes late in the simulation, and that hurt us. Our competition did a better job focusing on price and really all the other 4 attributes, especially in the final weeks. But I do think we learned not only from our early successes, but from those late mistakes. And arguably, I would say we learned even more than some of the teams that were a little less volatile with their share price. So for Team National, this is Mike Tarsella.
And this is Jason Fisk.
Thank you.